Hi, and welcome back to a very special episode of Orsa Knits. And today is special because I'm celebrating there being 2,000 of you now. So yeah, thanks so much for subscribing. We hit 2,000 a couple of weeks ago, and it's just been really exciting that so many of you want to share my knitting adventures with me. So in order to celebrate this milestone, I've asked you to send me some questions that you have, and I was planning on knitting along as I answered your questions. You can see here I have a project all ready to go, but I'll show you it. Yeah, it's super complicated. So I tried to record a little bit whilst knitting this, and then I kind of gave up because I thought there's no way I'm going to be able to work cables and bobbles whilst also reading questions, answering questions. Whoa, way too much going on at once. So yeah, just imagine me knitting here while I answer your questions. And question number 1 is, any tips for getting through those really long / tedious projects? I'm currently only letting myself work on my wedding shawl and it's taking forever. Oh, a wedding shawl is such a beautiful and romantic sounding project. I hope one day to make a wedding shawl, maybe for myself or for someone else, but I can imagine all the fine work does take a really long time. Now, thinking of long and tedious projects, probably the most tedious project I ever made was actually the Friday tee by Petite Knit, because you're talking about a really quite simple sort of design and structure, and just, is it broken rib for that? On, I don't know, 3.5 or 3mm needles, fingering weight yarn, and I started to feel like that project was never going to end, if I'm honest. It just took me ages. And I do agree with you with only letting yourself work on one thing when it's taking you a really long time, just because I feel like I get really distracted and think about working on something else when I know I should finish the project that has been bugging me. So I suppose it's horrible that it's kind of long and boring, but it will be worth it at the end. And my advice would be to try and watch something amusing or listen to an audiobook or a knitting podcast or something while you work, just because then you'll have something that takes your mind off it. That's the only thing I can really say for that one that I do for myself, because you just kind of have to power through sometimes if it's a long and tedious project. Sorry. Now on to the second question. Well, actually, there are 2 questions here. When / why did you move to Italy? And do you plan on staying there, or is it only for a certain number of years? Now, I've been actually kind of living in and out of Italy for quite a few years now. I went to school here for 2 years, so I finished my schooling in the IB system in Milan. So that's like equivalent to A-levels for any of you who know the British system. So last 2 years of school. And I'm ashamed to say that my Italian is still super rubbish, because if I'm honest, I never thought that we were going to come back and live here longer. Oh goodness, the sun's just come out. I'm just going to turn that brightness down. So yeah, as I was saying, I lived here for 2 years, the last 2 years of my schooling. That was really fun. And then I went to university in England, where I studied modern and contemporary literature and creative writing, which I adored. And now I'm back in Italy again, because my parents live here and my boyfriend is Italian, and of course his whole family live here too. So after the pandemic and the sort of chaos of those couple of years, we thought it was best to come back and to be with family and stay with family some of the time, just because we'd both finished our postgraduate qualifications right sort of when the pandemic hit. He was finishing his, and finding work is not that easy when there's a global pandemic going on. And the bit about, is it only for a certain number of years? Now this one I actually can't really answer. We're kind of seeing how it goes at the moment. Luckily, I came here right before the cut-off point for Brexit, so my rights to live here are sort of solid, let's say. But yeah, Brexit was a whole sort of kind of disaster for people caught in between like me, unfortunately. But yeah, luckily I did manage to swoop in and get my permesso di soggiorno just before that deadline. So I've got however many years that allows me to stay here, and we're just going to see how it goes and see what happens. Now, the second question from the same person, Sophia, is do you have any unpopular knitting opinions? I suppose one of my unpopular opinions is probably that knitting is really expensive. I think when you start knitting, people have this idea that may have been true for our parents or our grandparents, that it's going to be cheaper to make your own clothes, you're kind of being thrifty, and that's really not the case. I mean, knitting is surprisingly expensive, which is why I really appreciate brands like Drops that allow me to buy quality natural fibres whilst also not completely breaking the bank. So that's one unpopular knitting opinion. And another one would be that I don't like, I've expressed this before, but I don't always like how all of the measurements go off your bust measurement, and then only a certain amount of ease is recommended. And so often it finishes at a point which on me is super, super unflattering, and I do actually need to go up a size to accommodate for the fact that my hips are not the same size as my bust. So maybe that's just like a personal sort of grimble of mine, but yeah, that's one of my opinions too. Too many patterns make things for shapes which not everybody has, I guess, would be a good way to put that. Yeah. Now the next question is, do you have cast on fever, or are you more of a one at a time knitter? Now, I do often get cast on fever. I see a new project, I have the yarn for it, and I think, oh, I really, really want to start. But I do try and hold back, especially recently, because as I expressed in a video a few weeks ago, I find if I start too much at once and I've got loads of projects on the go, I end up not getting anything done at all, which is pretty rubbish and a habit that I would really like to break. So yeah, I do have cast on fever. I would happily work on loads of things, but nothing would ever get made. So at the moment, I am trying to be a one at a time knitter because I think it makes me a bit more productive. Now, this next question is not knitting related, but a few different people have asked me sort of stuff about where I'm from. And it says, I love your accent. What part of the UK is it from? This is maybe going to be a long-winded answer because it's a little bit complicated. So I was technically born near London, and I didn't spend very much time there at all. So my parents, they love to travel, and as soon as they could, we went to India when I was really, really little. And they are teachers, so international school teachers. And we lived in Thailand for many, many years before moving back to India for a bit, and then on to Italy for the last couple of years of my schooling. So I suppose my accent is kind of, I don't know, home counties, but it's definitely not from a specific place in England because honestly, even though I am English, I haven't really lived there. I've kind of lived all over the place, and my accent is sort of a weird combination of the British teachers who taught me at various schools, my parents, and yeah, whatever else I picked up along the way. I know that there are some words that I pronounce in like a kind of odd way. One that my mum points out to me, not that I've probably ever said this on a knitting video, but I say record player rather than record player, you know, weird stuff like that. And I've just put that down to the fact that, yeah, we've kind of been all over the place, so my accent can't exactly decide what it wants to be. Alright, so that wraps it up for my questions on YouTube, but you also kindly sent me a few over on Instagram. The next question is another one about how long have you lived in Italy? As I said before, on and off for quite a while. Are you fluent in Italian? As I mentioned before, it's quite embarrassing, but I am not by any means fluent in Italian. I do listen to my boyfriend and his family talk all the time, so I would say that I can listen to people speaking in Italian, but when it comes to stringing together sentences in a way that isn't embarrassing and weird and is completely coherent, I do still struggle with that quite a bit. I can get by, and I am trying to teach myself more Italian with my Duolingo on my phone. But yeah, I'm not fluent yet, but I do hope to get better, also just for the sake of communicating with my boyfriend's mum, because she does not speak English, so that can be a pretty interesting experience when I'm trying to tell her stuff. So yeah, hopefully one day I will be fluent, but I'm not quite yet. Now the next question, also by the same person, is, are there knitting communities there? I think that there are some knitting communities, sort of more modern knitting communities like you might see elsewhere, but the language barrier sort of makes me quite shy, and I find that my outlet for sort of getting my knitting chat in and talking to other people who share the same interests as me is online for the time being. But maybe sometime in the future I'll have to get myself out there and try and meet some fellow knitters. I do know that there is a knitting community set up around Fiordilana, because when I went in to buy my load of yarn a few months ago, there were lots of people tucked away in a little back room, all learning how to knit. And yeah, that's really nice. Everybody was very smiley, so it could be really cute to be involved in something like that. And yeah, this lady also says, want to meet up, I'm in Barcelona. I would really, really love to go to some sort of knitting event, sort of in continental Europe. I have tried to do a bit of research, but I do find them fairly difficult to come across in Italy itself, just because I think in Italy knitting is still a slightly more, I don't want to say old-fashioned, but yeah, maybe a slightly more old-fashioned sort of hobby and pursuit. So the demographics tend to lean a little bit differently from what they do like back in the UK, where I feel like a lot of people around my age are kind of getting involved in the knitting and fibre arts community. But yeah, if you have any cool suggestions for like yarn fairs or knitting events that are going on in Europe in the sort of next year or two, drop them down below. I'm always interested to hear, and I would love the chance to go and maybe meet some of you guys who watch my videos. Now this next question is one that I don't think I'm going to give a very satisfying answer to, and that is, what's your most used / favourite hand knitted summer garment? Unfortunately, I have not been much of a warm weather knitter for the last couple of years. I don't know what it is, I just think cotton is quite intimidating. Other plant fibres, they seem quite rough and difficult to work with, but I am trying to overcome that aversion, and I am actually signed up to a test knit at the moment for a summer top that I'm super excited to share with you all. So yeah, I haven't made much for summer. I reckon, I don't know if it counts, but the big sort of Augustine's hair bow that I made a few months back, if that counts as a summer knit, I really like wearing that when the weather is hot and I put my hair back a bit. I also like the camisole. I can't remember which number it is. My favourite things, camisole, I'll have to put the name down below on screen, that looks a little bit like crochet. I really, really like that top, but I can't say I get the most massive amount of wear out of it. I think part of it is also that I am a little bit shy and a little bit sort of averse to wearing fairly skimpy things. I might have to try layering it with more stuff. I think maybe that way I'll get a bit more wear out of it. But yeah, watch this space in the next few weeks and months, and I really hope that I'll have a lot more summer stuff to show you. I've actually got one video that I'm super excited about where I'm going to be making quite a few summer projects, and yeah, it should be really, really fun. Do you get project anxiety? If so, how do you get yourself over the hurdle to just start the project? This is a little bit of a funny one that I'm going to have to think about, because I don't think that I do get so much kind of anxiety to actually start. Sometimes I get anxious to do bits that I think are more difficult, and I reckon the best way to get over that is just to dive into watching a lot of tutorials, but in a very slow and calm way. Maybe start by working a couple of swatches to get yourself familiar with a new technique. So that's how I overcome my kind of fear that I'm going to mess something up, I suppose. But yeah, in terms of anxiety about starting a more simple project, I don't get that too much. Even if sometimes I do kind of get my yarn order in and then I think, oh, I ordered this yarn for this reason, but I just completely decide to change my mind and not make the original project. That does sometimes happen, but I guess that's not quite the same though. Ooh, I am back from a very quick intermission that you did not see, but both me and my camera were overheating because it is very, very warm here today. So now I'm going to get on to what I believe is the final question from Instagram. Hello, congratulations on 2K, thank you. I was just wondering what your job was, if it's not too personal. Yes, no, that's fine. I, at the moment, work remotely, so I work from home, which gives me a lot of time to get in some knitting here and there. And I work in sort of editorial kind of services, so I do proofreading, which just basically means trying to find the mistakes in any document that somebody gives me, which is ironic because in my personal life I am notoriously a little bit clumsy when it comes to mistakes, and I am going to try and be better with that in my personal life as well as my professional life. But yeah, that's what I do at the moment. I'm a proofreader. Now, I think that there was another set of questions on YouTube, but I've scrolled through and I can't seem to find them. But I believe I remembered one was, what are your favourite yarns, or like your top yarns? And yeah, that's a difficult one because I have tried quite a few, but I tend to gravitate more towards certain types. So I like things that have a good halo and a good amount of fluff and fuzz. And yeah, those are definitely sort of my favourite ones. I really like blown yarns as well. So a good example of that would be something like a Drops Air or a Drops Sky. And I'll see if I can actually get them because I've got some down here in my drawer. 1 second. Okay, I'm making a mess all over the place, but bear with me, it will be worth it. Okay, I can't find absolutely everything, but I've got a few bits to show you that are probably some of my favourite yarns. So I really like this. This is Sky by Drops. You can see it's kind of like this weird chain structure, which makes it really, really light, but also really soft. And in a similar vein, there's also Drops Air, which is like an Aran weight, fairly similar thing to this. I think it's less of a chain, it's more of a tube. And that Drops Air is sort of quite a good dupe for something which I'm using at the moment for a vest, which is this, Kos by Sandnesgarn. Again, quite a lot of halo and quite a lot of fuzz. You can see it's kind of like a tube structure. And yeah, I really like these again because they're soft, but they're also really, really light and just comfy and cozy to wear. So yeah, definitely recommend anything that's blown or in a kind of chain structure that has a fair amount of alpaca, because I really, really adore alpaca. And I'd like to try and make more stuff with alpaca silk if I can get my hands on some. Now, another yarn that I really enjoy, sorry it's a little bit battered, but this is a 100% merino, and it is Eco Baby by Lanes de Nord. I really like this yarn just because I think it's a gorgeous squishy merino, super soft, it feels very luxurious, and I just love this sort of kind of heathered colour effect that they have on a lot of their paler and neutral balls. Now, another one that I like And I like this purely because it's very affordable and you can hold it with mohair and it creates just a really nice soft squishy fabric, and that is Drops Flora, which I've got here in 2 different colours. This is really nice. It's a fingering weight yarn and it's just so affordable. It's all natural fibres, so some sort of blend of wool and alpaca. The alpaca gives it that extra fuzziness. If you can see, it kind of has a little bit of an alpaca halo, but this really, really shines when you hold it with the mohair, and you can make quite a fancy jumper out of this and the Drops Kid Silk, which is another favourite, and it won't cost you the earth. So yeah, as I mentioned, Drops Kid Silk. I've got some grey Drops Kid Silk here. This is one of my favourite mohairs just because it's so affordable. I haven't really found anything that has beat this in terms of value for a silk mohair. I am still looking, so any recommendations, do let me know because I love mohair yarns. Mohair is probably one of my favourites actually, but Drops Kid Silk, highly recommend it. And I suppose I should probably give you a couple more recommendations. This is Knitting for Olive Merino. This is something that I really adore too, but this one I like just because of the colours that it comes in. I think that Knitting for Olive offers the most fantastic array of kind of dusty, moody colours, very pretty and not terrible value for the merino, just because you get so many metres of it. I think this is 250 metres, which has knit up all of this bit of a camisole already. So yeah, decent value, beautiful shades. And another Knitting for Olive that I like is their Pure Silk. And I'm including this one just because I think it's a great recommendation for the summer. And it feels very, very luxurious. It's also really cool because it is 100% silk. So it feels lovely to wear, but it's, yeah, just something a little bit special. I'm actually gonna make something out of this in the next few weeks. So yeah, that about rounds it up. If you have any more questions for me, do drop them down below and I'll try and message you back very soon. Thank you so much for watching and for celebrating 2,000 of you being here. And I like to imagine that a stadium full of mostly ladies knitting would be very fun. I would love to see it in real life. But yeah, thanks so much for watching and I'll see you next time. Bye!